So Vera, I'd love to have you talk a little bit about, we're talking about jury trials, right? I'd love to have you talk a little bit about the deliberation process, right? The deliberation process, for those that are not familiar with what that means, the deliberation process is where the jury actually, right, goes to make a decision. Love to see if you could talk just a little bit about that, just kind of how that works, and any relevant stories that you think that could help, our listeners and viewers kind of understand that process.
Yeah, sure. So after the lawyers, right, the prosecutor and also the defense attorney, after they present all of their evidence, they give the so-called closing arguments, right? And the case goes to the jury for deliberation. So that means they exit the courtroom, right? And they go into a private deliberation process. So they are, behind closed doors. They can only talk to each other, right? They have no access to anything, outside, to the outside world, of course. And they can also only come back with, a unanimous verdict, right? So that means whenever the jurors will deliberate in private, right, behind closed doors, and they will have to make a decision whether the prosecutor has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty. So that's the main question they have to think about and discuss, right? It's usually a very heated discussion. It can take like very long, actually. Like in the US, the longest one, if I'm not mistaken, was over 4 months. So imagine, like, the court case itself takes, 2-3 months maybe, right? If it's a very intense court trial, and the dates are very intense by the judge.
Right.
But the deliberation process could even take longer than the whole court case. Or the opposite was also right, in case that in the US, at least in the US, there was a court case where the jurors only took 1 hour, right, to come back. So usually the criminal court cases take like several days, right, several months even. And they come back with, make a decision after 1 hour. So that can also happen. And I know that in New Zealand, which is like, of course not, my jurisdiction, and also not within the US, but in New Zealand, they even came back with 1.5 minutes. So they exited the courtroom. They were all, of the same opinion. They said, like, we know what to make. No one was contesting. They found a unique voice, right, an unanimous voice, and they said, acquitted or guilty. So after 1.5 minutes even. So that is something that no one will know how long the deliberation process takes. It takes as long as it's needed, right? The judge cannot come up and say, you need to come to an end now, we have no time. That's not possible, right? You cannot shorten it or try to extend it. So that means that as soon as a decision is made by all the jurors, right, and have to come back with one decision, then it's time to announce the decision, right, of the jurors. And yeah, after that, actually, only when you have a unanimous voice, a unanimous jury, and not a hung jury, right, only then the judge can actually make a sentence, right? Because the jury, the jury is not the one who makes a decision regarding the sentence, right? It's the judge. When there's, for example, guilty, the judge can then, say the sentence is XYZ, right? He has to then determine the length of the sentence. Or is there another, are there another additions that he has to make? So the jury is making the decision guilty or acquitted, right? And the judge is the one that makes the final decision in the end regarding the sentencing hearing.
And just for clarification for everyone, so a hung jury is where the jury cannot decide, right? They can't reach an agreement. It doesn't matter whether it's one person that doesn't agree or it's split 50-50, whatever it is. It's called a hung jury or a split decision, right? And then the consequence of that is a retrial, right? If they absolutely cannot come to a decision, no matter how much pressure the judge puts on them. And I say pressure because even though technically in the rules the judge cannot put pressure on them, but because, right, these people they have lives of their own, they have families, they have jobs, they're not getting paid very much. It's not a profitable endeavor, and they can't leave until that, until it's over. And the judge can force them to, as you know, right, say, well, because it would be easy to assume, right, for somebody who doesn't understand the criminal justice system to go, oh, cool. So they go back there, they talk, and then after 3 or 4 hours, if they can't agree, then it comes back and it's a hung jury, and they have to restart the process, right? It's a retrial.
Yes, and also what is very important to say, if there's a hung jury, then a new panel of jurors has to be selected. So all those jurors are getting dismissed. A new panel of jurors have to be selected. So the whole for a pretrial, for a new trial, for a retrial, pretty much, right? So that means like everything starts at zero, and even the jury selection starts at zero. And that's a big problem, right? Because that means for the suspect, he remains in jail, right? If he's not able to bail out or to have, to get out any other circumstances, that means he has to get back and everything starts from zero. So it could be an opportunity if, if it looked bad in the first place with the jury, right, for him or for her. But it leads also to, more anxiety and more stress on both sides, right? Because it's also, you have the right to a speedy trial. Remember that it's like every defendant has a right to a speedy and fair trial. And if you have a retrial, that means it could take, even a year longer until you have a decision and you have to show up in court again, right? Everything starts from scratch. So that's a problem. It doesn't happen a lot, but it happens.
And like you said, it could be a good thing or a bad thing for the defendant. If he's already incarcerated, it could definitely, it's leaning more towards potentially being a bad thing, but it depends on any number of factors. But here's another thing, because of what you just described, what happens is the judges, right, getting back to the judges putting pressure on the jury, like the judges will quite often, I don't know what verbiage they use or anything, but instead of like, if they can't agree after 4 hours, the judge can force them to stay back there the entire day, and then and if they still don't reach a decision, he can say, no, now you got to come back tomorrow and continue the discussion.
Yes.
And tomorrow they can reach a decision. A judge has the power to go, okay, well, we're just going to go ahead and keep this going for another week until you guys reach a decision, which is interesting because that's pressure. That's incredible pressure because these people are not making money, right? These jurors,
yes,
they're getting paid very little. They have all their personal, their entire life has to be put on hold.
Yes.
While they're doing this. So it's interesting. I don't know if you know if there's a limitation, or can the judge just decide that he's just going to keep them there for another day and another day? Are there limitations on that?
So as far as I'm concerned, I don't know exactly about limitations, right? But as far as I know, there is no proven deadline. So there you don't have a legal deadline until you have to come back and have a decision, right? And you can also, the problem is that the jurors, they usually don't know each other, right? Of course they don't know each other, right? They're sitting there, they have, they are under pressure. They know that it's a civil duty. You cannot just excuse yourself. And you have to sit there, you have to come to a decision, to a logical, rational decision, right? And you can only listen to what you heard in that courtroom. You cannot take into consideration what your belief system is, what your individual flavor is, right? Your taste, your preference. You cannot you have to pretty much like erase anything that you as a person grew up with or you were experiencing, right? Because you have to try to look at it. This is a single case and cannot compare it to anything, that happened before, right? Because then you might be biased, right? So the problem is that the jurors are also under a pressure because you will not know in the end if you reach a verdict, a decision, right? And if you get a hung jury, that's for the jurors, that's the worst that can happen because they spent all this time there, and they couldn't make a decision, right? So the trial has to restart, and it should lead to a fair trial, but as you know, we cannot guarantee, right? Like both sides, it's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed who benefits from a real trial, actually.
Yeah. That's interesting. And you mentioned that you alluded to this just a moment ago, like the pressures also from these heated arguments, right? And I mean, there's so much, I love studying psychology, and then if you understand psychology and the art of persuasion and how we're not equal when it comes to that. Some people are
Yeah.
better at persuading others. Some people are more easily persuaded, right? So even if you have potentially, right, just as an example, there's so many different scenarios, but you have somebody that might think you're innocent, but you have 10 other people out of 11, 10 out of 11, and out of those 10, right, that think that you are guilty.
Yeah.
And if there's one there that's very persuasive and you're the one standing alone, what is the likelihood that that one person is going to stand their ground? Like they've done all sorts of psychological studies on what people do. Like as a simple example, right? Like, and it's a funny one. Like, you know how when you get into an elevator, everybody looks forward, right? Everybody, the bigger elevators, especially like in the big cities, everybody looks straight ahead.
Yeah.
So they've done studies where like, they'll get like, 6 people, right? Or something, right? And then everybody will look to the back of the elevator and they're all in on it, right? They're all part of the study. And then somebody will walk in and they'll walk into the elevator and they're looking and everybody's looking the opposite direction. But people will just, they'll hesitate for a moment, but then even though they know that's a weird thing to do, they'll still do it.
Yes.
Because it's human nature.
Yes.
People like to be part of the group, to be accepted. They don't want to go against the grain. Most people don't have the backbone for that,
Yes, the herd mentality, right? Exactly. So, like a lot of people, as you said, they will just try to follow, the majority, instead of, saying what their actual opinion is. And you have someone there will always be like a leader in the group or of the jurors, always be someone that might not be the oldest, but might someone that is just very confident or dominant or has certain kind of authority for certain reasons, right? Or is like, is persuasive, or is someone that people are, oh, he's very smart, I have to believe this guy, he has a lot of knowledge or whatever, right? So this person could also like leading the jurors in, in like the way that they would not accept it or not see it, right? But subconsciously, there's a lot going on psychologically behind the doors that they wouldn't even, maybe in the back of the mind, they would say, okay, yeah, I believe I trusted this person more than the other person, but I'm not sure why, right? You cannot really, there's not really like a one reason why you trust one person more than the other, because this person might just seem more knowledgeable or more experienced, right? And then that leads to someone can also manipulate the decision, right? And pull others on your side. And that's the problem. You can never rule out those kind of things, because in a group, there's always like 1, 2, 3 people that are leading more than the rest.
I agree. And here's something interesting. You're saying that they're smarter, but that's not necessarily the case, right? It could just be their personality. They have a strong kind of alpha type mentality.
Yes.
You could end up somebody, right? If we can be just totally honest, somebody who's pretty stupid that doesn't really, wasn't maybe paying attention to everything that was being said, and maybe does not have the same processing ability that some of the other people have, right? But because of their alpha personality, they will persuade everybody else, because somebody else might be really smart and they probably were paying attention, taking good notes, and they really get the issues and they understand it. But if they have a weaker personality, it would, they could be persuaded and led astray by somebody who's not very bright just because of their sheer personality, right?
Yes. Yes, totally true, totally true. And that's the problem that we will always have when we have a jury trial, that we cannot say with any certainty or any guarantee that this is beneficial for either party. You can never say that. Every jury is like so dynamic, right? Also the combination, how many women, how many men, what races do you have in the jury? Hopefully it's mixed, it's not just one-sided. Like age, right? Age plays an important role too, because older generation might be able to endure more, right? Or might be capable of like just, have more patience and lasting longer in the courtroom, and just be able to to say, I have to go through this is my civil duty. Younger generation might say, they're impatient, they just don't want to sit there, right? They have to also not be able to use their devices, right? Electronic devices. Like, all these things play a certain role when you look at different age groups also.
No, yeah, absolutely. And you just mentioned, they can't look at their devices. It's interesting because now we know, right? They've done studies on this stuff too, where and we all kind of experience this, our attention span's so short, right? Because of the TikTok effect or the Instagram effect, right? Just short, quick bursts of attention. And if we know that that's the direction that all of the millennials and all of us really in general are heading in, with few exceptions. And then if a jury trial is 2 days, 3 days, a week, 2 weeks, what's the likelihood that they actually picked up on the nuances, on the little
Yes,
details that could prove that person?
exactly. Exactly. It's extremely hard. Like when we think about ourselves, right? How long do we watch a video, right? That is it's interesting to us. How long are we actually paying attention, right? If we're not the focus of the attention in that case. So a jury member has to actually sit there like absorb everything that they can to hopefully make the best rational and logical decision, right? But is everyone really motivated enough to do that, their best ability? I don't I don't want to say no, but experience just shows that people they put their effort, time, and passion into things that they want to, right? And if they are there for being, it's a civil duty, right? They have to be there. It's not, they would never be there on their own terms and sit there and not be able to work and not be able to make money, right? So that's a big problem, right? That they're almost getting, they're getting not compensated at all, or like a little bit, right? But it doesn't cover, if someone is a business owner and is a jury member, it's ridiculous to them, right? So to sit there, and it's pretty much wasting time for them, right? But if they look at it that way, they will probably not, they will not be focused on making the best decision for that person who sits there on the other side.
Yeah. What do you think is, and we talked about this before, but it's been about a month or so since we last talked. What do you think is a solution to this, right? I love to end on that note, if you don't mind. Like, what do you think there's a solution? And I'll
Yeah.
just,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think so. So like I have two options how to make this, fair or, better in legal terms. You could either raise the compensation, right, to make it more, to say, okay, listen, this is not, this is a job that you have to do, and this is, paid by taxes, right? So you would have to raise the compensation for each and every juror, or you say, you make it more you open it up for who is really willing to do this, right? To have, questionnaire in the beginning before you actually address someone, because everyone gets a letter in the mail and says, you're a jury, that's it. You have to show up at this point in time. Maybe you will be in a jury, maybe not, right? But you don't make it, some people might say, I want to do this, right? I want to, as a member of my community, I actually want to be a jury member, right? I want to be in the jury. So why not letting those people step up? You still gonna have a fair trial because there will be, you still can reject certain jury members. When you think someone is like overly motivated to, to convict people, right? Or, like just, random reasons, you can still, you will still reject those kind of people who have, who have bad motives, right? To just show up and try to convict people or try to manipulate the other jurors, or someone who has like a history, right, in certain matters, and they only want to volunteer because they have a certain motive, regarding that case. You're gonna still eliminate those, right, in the in the process, by the defense attorney, of course, right? So I would make it more towards a volunteering, yeah, a volunteering project, because then you have actually people who say, I want to be part of this, right? I want to be part of this. I want to make it fairer. I want to, find a good, decision, and I'm eager to listen, right? I want to be part of this court trial. I want to sit there and because it is of interest, right? And not someone who is, thinking about a million other things while they are sitting there, right? Make it more open to the ones who are actually committed.
yeah,
Or raise the compensation, because like that would be like a problem, financial problem, probably. To say that's taxpayer money, you have to raise it, right? Because otherwise you're not getting a fair jury.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I love both options. Especially, it's funny, we were both thinking the same thing. If you raise the compensation, and of course it depends on state by state.
Yes.
I think given the cost of living, here, where I'm at, like I would say, if you offered people, because I think they should be well compensated. Because look, even if I threw a crazy number, right? To some people it might seem crazy. If you offer them, say, $200 a day, right? That's here in Utah, that's quite a bit, right? Most people, or a lot of people, we'll say, not say most, we'll say a lot of people don't make $200 a day. But here's what happens. $200, and if you have, let's just say it's 11 jurors, right? So that's $100 $200 times 11, that's 2,200, right? That the state taxpayers are paying. And let's say it's a 3-day trial, right? Some of them
Yes.
are 1-day trials. So 2,200 times 3, that's 6,600. Now, taxpayers, some might say, why should I pay 6,600 to have this person, right, go to trial and so on and so forth? But if you juxtapose that, right, if you balance that out with the fact that most people don't go to trial, right? So you only have like 2%, 3% go to trial here in Utah, 3% maybe. And also, if you wrongfully convict somebody, or let's just say you wrongfully convict somebody, the cost to the taxpayers is not 6,600. The cost is more like 30, 40, 50. I heard different numbers, 50,000 a year. And if you just convicted somebody that shouldn't be convicted and they're going to spend 12 years in prison, well, and it's $50,000, do the math. That's way more expensive.
Exactly. So you just have to take it into comparison, right? Compare those numbers. And as you said, most even don't end up, or most people like don't end up having a jury trial in their case. So it's not that, you have to calculate those fees. It's not going to be a max number, right, in every case. And also, like when you take an average, like an average case between 3 and 4 months, maybe longer, maybe shorter, right? But also you have to just run those numbers and then have an average number, right? And it's compared to what you said, to having someone in jail that shouldn't even be in jail, or is wrongfully convicted. Then you will see that those numbers don't add up, right? And it shouldn't be the financial problem in the end, right? So, hopefully there's, at some point there's a reform, like there's something, that will, change, right? With maybe with a new administrative election, or maybe, just it's a state problem, right? So every state has to come up with, a certain change to make it more attractive also for people to actually go be a juror.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Vera, that brings us to our conclusion. Thank you again. This has been incredibly insightful. I think we touched on a lot of great subjects, and we really, I think it's been a great conversation. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, Vera, how can they get a hold of you?
Yes, so my firm is, all over Google. I believe we have like websites. You can contact us, through email. The website has a contact form. We have availability 24/7, right? So you can contact the office in Germany as well as in the US every day, night and day. So the website is lawyer-berlin-miami.com. I believe we put it also in the chat box below of this video. And yes, you can contact us anytime if you have any questions. Also, if you don't need representation and just have a question, we will be happy to answer that. And yes, thank you so much for today's episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, looking forward to the next one. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.